What happens when the American dream starts getting foreclosed? Across the country, the cracks aren't just showing up, they're widening. Home prices collapsing, inventory piling up like unsold merchandise, and landlords scrambling to find buyers who've already left town. Some cities are wobbling, others are in full retreat, and a few are pretending everything's fine while their housing markets quietly burn to the ground. So today, we're counting down the 10 US cities facing the most brutal housing collapse of 2026. From tech hubs turned ghost towns to Sunbelt darlings that partied too hard, these markets are giving back years of gains in months. And trust me, the number one spot will shock you. Number 12, Tampa, Florida. Tampa was supposed to be Florida's safe bet, not as flashy as Miami, not as overbuilt as Cape Coral, just a solid Sunbelt metro with jobs, beaches, and year-round sunshine. But in 2025, Tampa is leading Florida's West Coast housing reset, and the reset looks a lot like retreat. Home values have dropped 5.6% to 6% year over year, the sharpest decline since 2011. The median price now sits at $408,000, down from over $430,000 at the peak. That might not sound catastrophic, but the momentum is brutal. Inventory is up 18%, and a staggering 33% of active listings have price reductions. Days on market have jumped from 21 to 34 days. Homes that once moved in 3 weeks now sit for over a month, while sellers cut asking prices in hope. In St. Petersburg, part of the Tampa Bay metro, prices have crashed 7.6% in just 12 months. This isn't a blip, it's a regional unraveling. The usual suspects are here: insurance costs spiraling, climate risk becoming uninsurable, and pandemic remote workers heading back to offices or cheaper states. But Tampa's decline is also a bellwether. As goes Tampa, so goes Sarasota, Punta Gorda, and the rest of Florida's west coast. Tech layoffs haven't helped. Tampa positioned itself as a tech hub alternative to Miami and Austin, but the 2023 to 2024 layoff wave gutted that dream. What's left is a market with too much supply, not enough buyers, and sellers who are starting to panic. And Tampa isn't collapsing yet, but the foundation is cracking fast. Number 11, Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas knows how to put on a show. Bright lights, endless buffets, and a housing market that convinced investors the boom would last forever. Except in 2025, the show's over, the audience left, and nobody's buying tickets. Las Vegas has the fastest cooling housing market in the entire nation. Inventory has exploded 44.8% year over year, the highest inventory surge in America. While home sales have collapsed 10.2%, the median price sits at $470,000, down 2.1% from 2024, but the real story is what's not selling. Days on market have jumped from 36 to 51 days, and the number of homes sitting without offers is up 37% for single-family homes and 50% for condos. The market has shifted 96.7% toward buyers, the second biggest shift in the nation, yet buyers still aren't biting. What killed Vegas? Oversupply and tourism collapse. Developers built like the pandemic party would never end, flooding the market with new inventory. Meanwhile, tourism dropped 11.3% in June 2025, hammering the service economy that funds most of Vegas's workforce. Add in government shutdown fears hitting Nevada's economy and mortgage rates still hovering above 6%, and the math stops working. Investors who bought rental properties expecting Airbnb gold are now stuck with vacant homes and negative cash flow. Las Vegas bet big on endless growth. In 2025, the house isn't winning. It's underwater, waiting for buyers who never show up. Number 10. Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix was supposed to be the poster child of the American migration dream. Endless sunshine, affordable living, a booming job market. It had everything. Remote workers fled California, retirees cashed out, and investors snapped up rental properties like they were printing money. For a while it worked. Home prices soared, new developments sprawled across the desert, and Phoenix looked unstoppable. But in 2025, the music stopped, and when it did, nobody was left dancing. Home prices in Phoenix have dropped between 1.3% and 7.4% year over year, depending on the neighborhood. But the real story is in the inventory explosion. As of mid-2025, Phoenix has 18,701 homes sitting on the market, the highest inventory level since 2017. New listings surged 20% compared to last year, yet buyer interest has virtually vanished. Homes that once sold in days now sit for 50 days or more, collecting dust and price cuts. Goldman Sachs didn't mince words. They warned clients that Arizona housing prices could fall 25% between 2023 and 2024. That warning is playing out in real time. Sales are down 35% from pandemic peaks, and the market has decisively shifted in favor of buyers, except the buyers aren't showing up. What went wrong? Simple. Oversupply met reality. Developers built like the boom would never end, flooding the market with cookie-cutter subdivisions. Meanwhile, interest rates doubled from their pandemic lows, crushing affordability for the very demographic Phoenix relied on, out-of-state transplants willing to pay a premium for desert living. Add in scorching summers that now routinely exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit, rising homeowners' insurance costs, and water supply concerns, and the Escape California narrative started to crack. Phoenix isn't in free fall yet, but with Goldman Sachs' massive inventory and buyer fatigue all pointing the same direction, this desert oasis might be the next mirage to disappear. Number 9. Miami, Florida. Miami has always played with fire, luxury high-rises, international money, and a real estate market fueled by speculation and sunshine. But in 2025, Miami earned a distinction nobody wanted: the world's riskiest housing market according to UBS's Global Real Estate Bubble Index. Not just in the US, in the world. For the second year running, UBS flagged Miami with a bubble risk score of 1.73, well above the 1.5 threshold that signals danger. Home prices have skyrocketed 70% since 2019, while household incomes have barely budged. The price-to-rent ratio now exceeds the 2006 housing bubble peak, a threshold that should make anyone who lived through the Great Recession nervous. The median home price in Miami sits around $595,000, but the real cost is what comes after: skyrocketing HOA fees, insurance premiums that have doubled or tripled since 2022, and climate risk that's no longer theoretical. Listings are down 4.8% year over year, not because demand is strong, but because sellers are refusing to accept reality. Instead of lowering prices, they're delisting and waiting for a market recovery that may never come. Days on market have stretched to 74 days median. It's a sharp reversal from the bidding war frenzy of 2021 to 2022. Inventory is quietly rising as condo owners, especially in older buildings facing massive special assessments for structural repairs, try to exit before costs spiral further. The insurance crisis is the silent killer. Florida's nonprofit state insurer has raised rates 164% on average since Hurricane Ida, and private carriers are fleeing coastal markets entirely. Nearly 500,000 Floridians face losing flood insurance if federal programs aren't extended. Man, Miami sits at ground zero. UBS didn't mince words. Miami is a bubble waiting to pop. The only question is when and how hard the landing will be. Number 8. Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has always marched to its own beat, a company town where the company is the federal government. For decades, that meant stability, reliable jobs, steady incomes, and a housing market insulated from the volatility that crushed other cities. But in 2025, that stability is unraveling fast. Home prices in the DC metro area have declined 13% from their 2022 peak, and the correction isn't over. Days on market have extended significantly, inventory is rising, and buyer interest has cooled as political and economic uncertainty grips the region. The culprit? Federal workforce cuts, the creation of the Department of Government Efficiency, DOG, and ongoing threats of government shutdowns have put 14% of the metro area's workforce, federal employees, directly in the crosshairs. In October 2025, as shutdown fears mounted again, real estate experts warned that the DC housing market would feel direct impact from the uncertainty. One economist didn't hold back. "They're playing with fire," he said, referring to the political brinksmanship threatening federal paychecks and regional stability. When 11% of your workforce depends on Congress passing a budget, and Congress can't agree on lunch, your housing market has a problem. Even before the latest shutdown drama, the DC market was lagging. While other mid-Atlantic metros posted modest gains, DC struggled with slower price appreciation and extended listing periods. The commercial real estate crisis, driven by remote work and empty office towers, compounded the pain, draining tax revenue and putting pressure on local budgets. Unlike Sunbelt cities with oversupply or climate risk, DC's collapse is political and structural. Federal employees are leaving or bracing for cuts. Buyers are holding back. Homeowners are quietly listing before the bottom falls out. Washington built its economy on government. Now that foundation is cracking, and the housing market is the first casualty. Number 7. Fort Myers, Florida. Fort Myers was the retirement paradise everyone wanted. White sand beaches, warm winters, golf courses stretching to the horizon, and it was the Florida dream without Miami's chaos or Orlando's crowds. Investors piled in during the pandemic, convinced that rental properties in Southwest Florida were a one-way ticket to passive income, and for a while they were right. But 2025 has been a rude awakening. Home prices in Fort Myers have plunged 13% from their 2022 peak, with the median home now sitting at $357,000, down from over $410,000 just 3 years ago. Days on market have stretched to 75 to 80 days, a sharp reversal from the bidding wars of 2021 when homes sold in hours. And here's the kicker, 70% of properties are now selling below their list price. The culprit isn't just oversupply, though that's part of it. It's the insurance apocalypse. Homeowners insurance premiums in Southwest Florida have surged 100 to 200% depending on flood and fire risk zones. For many buyers, the math simply doesn't work anymore. A $350,000 home with $5,000 to $8,000 annual insurance costs on top of property taxes and HOA fees turns the affordable Florida dream into a financial trap. Then there's the investor exodus. Short-term rental returns, once a reliable 10 to 15% gross ROI, have collapsed to break even or negative cash flow as vacation rental supply exploded and Airbnb regulations tightened. Investors who bought at the peak are now underwater, facing monthly losses on properties they can't sell without taking a beating. Hurricane Ian's devastation in 2022 didn't help. While the area rebuilt, it also exposed just how vulnerable coastal Florida is to climate risk, and insurance companies responded by raising rates or pulling out entirely. FEMA's new flood insurance pricing model has added another layer of costs, sometimes doubling premiums overnight. Fort Myers built its housing market on sun, sand, and speculation. In 2025, all three are working against it. Number 6, Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham's collapse isn't a 2025 story. It's a 70-year decline finally reaching its endgame. This is what happens when an entire city's economic foundation crumbles and never rebuilds. Since 1960, Birmingham has lost 40% of its population as steel industry jobs vanished and younger generations fled for Atlanta, Nashville, and Charlotte. What's left is a hollowed-out urban core with economic vacancy rates hitting 15% and thousands of abandoned homes rotting in neighborhoods that once thrived. Home prices have fallen 15% from their modest 2022 peak, but the real crisis is in the abandoned housing stock. Entire blocks sit empty, condemned, but not demolished because the city lacks funds for mass clearance programs. Property values in distressed areas have collapsed so far that homes literally can't be sold. Title clearing costs and back taxes often exceed the property's worth. Unlike Sunbelt cities dealing with oversupply or insurance crises, Birmingham's problem is structural death. The city's tax base has eroded so severely that basic services are strained, infrastructure crumbles, schools close, young professionals leave. It's a vicious cycle decades in motion, and 2025 is just another year of managed decline. There are pockets of hope, downtown revitalization efforts, some new apartment construction showing a 200% surge in development activity, but these are islands in a sea of decay. The broader metro area isn't growing, it's shrinking and aging, with a median age climbing and workforce participation dropping. Birmingham doesn't have a housing market collapse in the traditional sense. It has something worse, a slow-motion abandonment where property values erode, tax revenue vanishes, and the city quietly becomes uninvestable. This isn't a market correction. This is what happens when a city loses its reason to exist, and nobody can figure out how to give it a new one. Number 5, San Francisco, California. San Francisco was supposed to be invincible. Tech money, global prestige, a housing market so tight that $2 million condos sold sight unseen. The city was bulletproof, or so everyone thought. But in 2025, the shine is coming off the Golden Gate. Home prices have dropped 16% from their 2022 peak, erasing billions in homeowner wealth across the Bay Area. The median home price is still a jaw-dropping $1.4 million, but even at that level, values are flat, up just 0.07% year over year, and forecasts predict another 3% decline through August 2026. What broke San Francisco? Tech layoffs. Tens of thousands of high-paying jobs vanished in 2022 to 2024 as Meta, Google, Twitter, now X, and countless startups slashed headcount. The workers who could afford $3,000 to $5,000 rents and $1.5 million starter homes, they're gone. Some moved to Austin or Miami. Others left tech entirely. The demand engine that powered SF's housing market for a decade just stopped. Remote work compounded the crisis. Why pay San Francisco prices when you can work from Boise, Denver, or Portugal? The Bay Area saw a mass exodus during the pandemic, and many of those remote workers never came back. Office towers downtown sit half empty, commercial real estate values have cratered, and the city faces a budget crisis as tax revenue from business districts evaporates. Days on market remain relatively low at 21 days. San Francisco is still competitive, but that's because inventory is artificially constrained. The broader Bay Area average home value is down 3.8% year over year to $1.1 million, and Zillow sees further declines ahead. San Francisco isn't collapsing like Cape Coral or Birmingham, but it's experiencing something arguably worse: a slow deflation of the myth that tech wealth is permanent and housing prices only go up. The city that reinvented itself as America's innovation capital is learning a hard lesson. When the innovation moves, so does the money, and the housing market follows. Number 4, New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans has always danced on the edge: jazz, hurricanes, floods, and a culture that refuses to die no matter how hard disaster tries. But in 2025, the city's housing market is facing a threat even Katrina couldn't deliver: slow, grinding economic abandonment. Home prices have crashed 19% from their 2022 peak, one of the steepest declines in the nation. The median home now sits at $306,000, down from over $375,000 just 3 years ago. Days on market have stretched to 97 days, more than 3 months of homes sitting unsold, accumulating price cuts and desperation. But the real crisis is demographic. New Orleans' population has declined 3.3% over the past decade, and the city ranks a dismal 292nd out of 300 for first-time home buyers. Young professionals and families are leaving, and they're not being replaced. What's left is an aging population, a tourism-dependent economy vulnerable to every hurricane season and economic downturn, and a housing market with no organic demand growth. Inflation-adjusted home prices in New Orleans are trending down long-term, currently sitting 14% below their historical trend line. That's not a temporary dip. That's a structural problem. The city's economy can't generate the wages or job growth needed to support housing demand, and the result is a market quietly deflating while everyone pretends Mardi Gras can sustain a city. Insurance costs compound the misery. Flood insurance premiums have skyrocketed under FEMA's new risk rating 2.0 system, sometimes doubling overnight for properties in high-risk zones. Homeowners insurance has followed suit, with coastal Louisiana seeing some of the highest rates in the nation. New Orleans isn't collapsing in a spectacular crash. It's bleeding out slowly. One family moving to Houston at a time, one sold home that never gets replaced, one abandoned neighborhood that quietly empties. The music's still playing, but fewer people are listening. Number 3, Cape Coral, Florida. Cape Coral was the pandemic's golden child. Waterfront living, Cape Coral became the place where retirees, remote workers, and investors all believed they'd found paradise on a budget. Home prices exploded, peaking near $441,000 in 2022. And for a moment, Cape Coral looked like the future of Florida living. Then reality showed up with an eviction notice. By 2025, Cape Coral home prices have plunged 20% from their peak, now sitting around $360,000. Days on market have ballooned to 84 days, and here's the truly brutal part: 70% of homes are selling below their original list price. That's not a correction, that's a fire sale where sellers are taking whatever they can get just to escape. The inventory explosion tells the real story. In 2021, Cape Coral had around 800 active listings. By mid-2025, that number exceeded 3,000, creating 7 to 8 months of supply in a market that once moved homes in weeks. New construction stopped paying off as resale inventory flooded the market, and builders quietly shelved projects. Insurance is the silent killer. Homeowners' insurance premiums have doubled or tripled since 2022, depending on flood and fire risk zones. Florida's state-backed insurer has raised rates 164% on average since Hurricane Ian, and private carriers are fleeing Southwest Florida entirely. FEMA's risk rating 2.0 flood insurance pricing has added another crushing layer of costs, sometimes increasing annual premiums by $3,000 to $5,000 for waterfront properties. Then there's the underwater problem. And we're not talking about mortgages. An estimated 8% of recent buyers in Cape Coral are already underwater on their loans, owing more than their homes are worth. These aren't speculators from 2006. These are families who bought in 2022 to 2023, thinking they were getting in before prices went higher. Cape Coral built its dream on canals, sunshine, and speculation. In 2025, all three are drowning it. Number 2, Austin, Texas. Austin was the pandemic's poster child, the city where California dreamed of escaping to. Tech workers fled the Bay Area, corporations relocated headquarters, and housing prices went vertical. Between 2020 and 2022, home values skyrocketed 63%, reaching a peak median price near $650,000. Austin was unstoppable, until it stopped. By 2025, Austin has given back more than half those gains. Home prices have crashed 24% from their June 2022 peak, now sitting around $495,000. That's a $155,000 loss in equity for anyone who bought at the top. And thousands did, convinced that Austin's growth was permanent. The affordability crisis became existential. Even with the correction, homes remain wildly expensive relative to local incomes, and interest rates hovering near 6.2% have crushed buying power. First-time buyers who could afford a $650,000 home at 3% interest can barely qualify for a $500,000 home at 6% plus, even though the price dropped. Then there's the oversupply problem. Austin leads the nation in new apartment construction with 64.5 units per 10,000 people, nearly double the national average. Developers built like the boom would never end, and now they're stuck with inventory nobody wants at the prices they're asking. Listings are down 4.8% year over year, but that's because sellers are pulling properties off the market rather than accept reality. The remote work reversal dealt the final blow. Companies that championed work from anywhere in 2021 started mandating return to office policies in 2023 to 2024. Suddenly, the workers who moved to Austin for cheap living while keeping their California salaries found themselves stuck, overpaid for Austin, but not earning enough to move back to San Francisco or LA. Austin isn't just correcting, it's unwinding an entire pandemic-era fantasy about remote work, endless growth, and housing as a one-way bet. The music capital of the world is learning that not all songs have happy endings. Number 1. Oakland, California. Oakland was supposed to be San Francisco's affordable alternative, the scrappy neighbor where artists, families, and working-class folks could still buy into the Bay Area dream without selling a kidney. For years, that narrative held. Oakland's proximity to San Francisco, BART access, and cultural vibrancy made it a magnet for those priced out of the city across the Bay. But in 2025, Oakland isn't the alternative anymore. It's ground zero for the Bay Area's housing collapse. Home prices have plummeted 24% from their May 2022 peak, tied with Austin for the steepest decline in the nation. The median home price now sits at $700,691, down from over $920,000 just 3 years ago. That's a $220,000 loss in equity. Life-changing money evaporating in less time than it takes to get a building permit. The price per square foot tells an even grimmer story, down 8% year over year, signaling that this isn't just a correction in overpriced luxury condos, it's across the board. Days on market remain relatively low at 27 days, but only because desperate sellers are slashing prices to move inventory before the bottom falls out completely. What killed Oakland? Tech layoffs, crime, and exodus. The same tech sector that fueled Oakland's rise abandoned it when remote work made geography irrelevant and companies started cutting headcount. Families who moved to Oakland for affordability found themselves stuck in a city with rising crime, deteriorating public services, and a housing market in free fall. The city's tax base is eroding as high earners leave for Austin, Miami, or out of California entirely. Commercial real estate downtown is in crisis, with office vacancy rates climbing and businesses relocating or closing. What's left is a housing market with no natural buyers. Locals can't afford it, and outsiders don't want it. Oakland doesn't just lead the list, it defines what housing collapse looks like when an entire economic ecosystem unravels. So there you have it. 10 cities where the housing dream became a foreclosure notice. From tech hubs to Sunbelt darlings, the collapse is real, the data doesn't lie, and 2025 isn't finished yet. Which city shocked you the most? Drop it in the comments, and stay sharp out there.